As we explore how automation can drive out efficiencies in manufacturing companies. So we're going to start off with just a round of introductions from our panel and then really dive into the topic. And what we really want to create today is some open conversations with you guys as well. So we'll try and make sure that we leave plenty of room for questions and discussions because it's an important topic for the manufacturing community. So George, if you want to start with an introduction about yourself, and also what we're going to do with a little bit of a difference this morning is talk about one of the daily processes in your life that could benefit from automation. If you could share that as well, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. I think, is this on? Is it working? Yeah, okay, good. Right, so my name is George Thompson. I am the UK sales manager for Good Linear Tech UK. I've been involved with robotics and automation projects for 25 years, thereabouts. So hopefully I have a vague idea what I'm doing now. With regards to my daily life, I think the easiest thing that I could automate is finding a car that would drive itself. And that would work. That way I could do stuff while I'm driving to work.
Hi there, my name is Martin Kidman and I work for SICK. And I cover South and West Europe for all of our safety solutions. I also sit on two committees with the BSI, and I work in developing standards in safe robotics and also safety of industrial driverless trucks, which you may know as AGVs and AMRs. Regarding automation, looking at this morning's antics, if I could automate anything, it would probably be getting my 10 and 12-year-old little girls up out of bed, dressed into school. And if you could do that, I'd take your money right now.
Hi, I'm Andrew Mason from RAR UK Automation. I'm a sales manager and I sort of specialise in a few of our in-the-line products and more traditional robotics. In efficiency, I find my inefficiency is managing my email. It's easy to get distracted, so you set a clear task for the day and then you go off on a tangent, and so if I could automate that better, probably by turning it off for a while is pretty good, I think.
Hi, my name's Oliver Selby, Head of Sales at Fanuc UK. I'm responsible for CNC solutions, robots and some of the robo machines that we sell here in the UK. I also sit on the BARA Council, as with the rest of these gentlemen. In terms of my automating to reduce inefficiencies, I think I always try and push some of the Japanese philosophies into the customers that I visit. Japanese are very, very good at spotting and identifying those opportunities to reduce inefficiencies. Many of them taught in UK schools and universities. So I always try and look for that and try and use those Japanese philosophies as a Japanese company.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that was really insightful. So I think even from that conversation we can see that there's quite a lot of inefficiencies that happen kind of outside of work as well as inside of work, and if you're sat here from a kind of manufacturing organisation, you know that inefficiencies kind of really cause a lot of pain. They can cause issues in terms of impact on kind of revenue, quality, cost, like lack of compliance, and it's really, really important that we tackle inefficiencies head on, and automation and robotics kind of plays a fundamental role in solving some of those challenges. So the first conversation that I've got for you all is, how can organisations first foster a continuous improvement culture to identify and address inefficiencies in the workplace? So I don't know who would like to go first in answering that question, but very much focused around culture of continuous improvement.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges in the UK at the moment is culture. Not only with the fact that automation is lacking in terms of the adoption rates compared to our European and our global counterparts. I think culture is a difficult one. Knowing that young people are coming through education, they're being pushed down certain career choices by people that may or may not have been through what we're going through right now. I think that's the important thing, is actually giving those young people, giving those people who are guiding those young people, the careers advisors, the teachers, the mentors that are coming from industry, giving them the knowledge of what automation can bring those businesses. So I think a culture of education to all stakeholders is what's really needed.
So I was going to come in and say that I think in an organisation where you want to breed the culture in the company, you've got to get some success. And so having an automation, you've got to identify an automation project which is going to give you some success to get then everybody on board to enhance all the other the next project. So I think we're going to talk about how to identify and such and how we make a clear vision of what we want. But I'd say pick projects in automation you want to automate and get the staff on board. But to do that, you've got to be a success, because they're always looking for a failure. Look for a success, so make it successful.
Yeah, I think coming from a safety world, I can relate this to kind of implementing a culture of functional safety management as well. And with any culture in an organisation, I think it's the remit of managers at the end of the day. And I think to change the culture, you need a clear strategy. But to support that, and it's quite, I think I use quite a lot in our strategy, that you need to support it with some good tactics, because tactics can be great, but without a strategy, it's just chaos. But I think when you have a strategy with no tactics, it's just a nice dream. So you need to think about some good tactics to support that strategy. So these could include incentives for increasing productivity. They could include various training courses, assessments. So I think a good strategy, but supported by good tactics as well.
Yeah, I would agree with all of those, of course. Going on from Oliver's point about culture, if you walk around every factory tour that I've ever had, the first thing that anyone wants to show me is the oldest piece of equipment they have in the building. And they are proud of the fact that it was originally driven by steam and has been converted and changed and modified over the years. And that's all well and good. It ticks the sustainability box in my head anyway. But then you go to our neighbors on the continent, and the first thing they want to show you is the newest, most efficient piece of equipment that they have. They're not interested in keeping the old stuff running. They want to constantly evolve. So that again goes on to the Six Sigma principle. We're always evaluating. We're always looking at the better way to do things. I think that's something that we should embrace wholeheartedly here.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, because should we be automating waste, or should we be looking at first removing waste and then looking at how we can automate? And that probably leads nicely on to the next question is, where would you start? So if you were leading a manufacturing business or sat here as an engineering manager, where would you start when you're looking at automating and addressing those inefficiencies? And what are some of the things that you wouldn't do? Because often we talk about things that we would focus on, but what wouldn't you do? So anybody want to kind of start with where you would start?
Shall I come in? I think we need to, I mentioned earlier, you want to get a success. So I think companies can be guilty of overcomplicating initial application, and then you either overprice it and it doesn't get past the board, or it's so complicated it fails. I think you've got to look for doing your homework on what's going to give you some value, something that's going to be relatively simple, and also engage that you can use humans and automation together to get the best out of both to get a success application. I think once you get one success, it breeds success.
I think we're probably all going to try and answer this in the same way, because we've got similar questions. So I think from my point of view, inefficiencies are not going to jump out of a machine and present themselves to you. So I think the most important thing really is to gain the status quo. So you need to know where you are to know where you're going. And I like the British cycling success. They were based on the 1% factor, and this is marginal gains. And the whole philosophy there was that a small change can make a big impact. So I think small strategic goals is a good way forward. And also using things like analytics and dashboards and maybe a plan of the production area for a starting point to understand actually how good are we now and how can we improve, and how can we monitor that as well?
So I'm actually going to answer that slightly differently, much to probably Martin's discussed. But having worked in Europe for some time, I've seen different ways in which automation has been adopted. And although the low-hanging fruit, the small marginal gains are important, what I've seen in Europe is some of the larger companies actually taking a big step forward. Having the confidence and the commitment to actually drive bigger automation projects. One really good example of that is a company called Husqvarna, who you will know from, say, robotic lawnmowers, but sort of machinery for garden. And it's not good, is it? Should have turned it off. So they make garden equipment. Where they took huge steps was actually in their chainsaw blade sharpening facility. And you think, well, how much chain do they actually manufacture? Well, they had 16 grinding machines, and they put 3 robots in every machine. Well, they've just employed 40 plus robots on these 16 machines making chainsaw blades. That's a big step for any company to take. But what did it do? It gave them market share that is leading globally for chains to cut trees down. Unfortunately, it's not a very nice thing to think about, but it happens. So the big gains are important as well as the small gains. You've got to have commitment from a company. And I think that's really where UK companies can also look and focus. If the value is there and the return on investment is there on the bigger gains, make the commitment.
Yeah, I do agree with you as well. There are 2 approaches to this, either top down and bottom up. And we've done this as well with Fanuc robots. So Mills, we started with small gains, and they realised the potential, and then they introduced a full robot system. So I agree, but there's 2 approaches.
Well, I'm going to jump in with a different perspective. Surprise, surprise. I think the first step for anyone is to look at the 3 Ds, the dull, the dirty, the dangerous. And if anyone heard me speak earlier, then you would have heard me talk about this. Those are the quick results. You do your risk assessments based on what is happening in a particular process. And if it's something that could potentially harm a human, that's the bit to start automating. The one I love to pick on is end-of-line palletizing. The amount of times that you go into major companies and they have people at the end of line stacking boxes onto pallets, and you're like, really? And the other one is wrapping the pallets. You see these poor people running around pallets with stretch film, and you're like, really? We have the technology, people. And not only that, the stretch film, the auto wrappers will use 30% less plastic on average than a person running around it. It's a better wrap, it keeps the load stable, it reduces waste. What's not to like?
Brilliant. Does anybody else want to talk about any specific case studies in that area? I suppose specifically relevant for kind of more smaller businesses, because I think like the example that you shared is brilliant, but
I can share a small example as well in that, and kind of reflecting on George's point there are those companies that are bringing products to market. Unfortunately, they're not here at the show, but they do exist, bringing robotics as a service to the market. Now, I think where we see that being adopted most readily is in palletizing solutions, bringing robots to those end of lines that need boxes palletizing, and they're offering them out at prices that are less than minimum wage. That's really important because it effectively can give you a robotic solution on your OPEX and not your CAPEX. It's a different way to approach automation. It's a really, really good way forward. But it means that the cost is so low that it just makes sense, and it's almost a risk-free way of trying automation.
Yeah, I'm sorry about talking about safety all the time, but it's my thing. But we have something called creating safe productivity philosophy. And one of the examples that you can see in everywhere is the AGV. So single-handedly, the invention of the safety laser scanner increased productivity by about 40%. So before a safety laser scanner, you had a bump strip on the front of an AGV, which meant they had to go around factories really slowly because they had to stop in time before hitting somebody. And then when they introduced a safety device which will stop the equipment, it could see further ahead, so it meant it could speed up and it could dynamically change fields. And we see lots of examples like that, for example, in presses as well. Historically, you'd have to use a two-hand control to operate a cycle, and now you can do things like presence sensing device activation. So when you take your hands out of the curtain, it automatically runs a cycle. So I think if you speak to suppliers and people like that, there are lots of good examples and case studies where we can improve your efficiencies and productivity, but don't be afraid of adding safety as well, would be my main message.
We've talked about, and Martin used the word top up and top to bottom or bottom to top, and so Oliver said about Husqvarna, where they had a big project to automate. Great. There's also the smaller projects. I think the management of a company have got to look where they are, because it's all nice to have a new building, empty site. You can then manage your production because you've got a clean sheet of paper. You can bring in automation and work. But the reality is most factories are not like that. They're tight for space. You've got to then find a solution that fits your workshop and your culture as well. So there's so many options, but I think the key is that management have got to be skilled enough to identify what's going to work for them and what won't work for them.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's not just for big companies. Yeah, some of the cottage industries, they can benefit from simple automation. It doesn't have to include a robot. It doesn't have to include lots of other things. It could be something as simple as a label applicator. You know, if you're someone that's just starting out, it doesn't have to be big. It can be simple.
So George, you've set it up nicely again. Thanks very much. So all of you are very active with BARA. So those of you who don't know, BARA is the British Association of Robotics and Automation, if I get that correctly. And you're all council members, if I'm not mistaken. So often people interchange the word robotics and automation together. Before we move on to robotics, is there a difference? And if so, what is it? We probably haven't got 45 minutes to debate this, so maybe a nice short answer would be good.
I'll jump in with a very simple answer. It's yes and no. So automation can include robotics, but it can also be anything else. I like to think of automation as the human body. So the robot is the beating heart. The PLC is your brain. Everything has to work together. And, you have sensors, you have everything that works in unison to make it a viable solution for any or whatever the application is.
Yeah, sorry. Go. I've actually been asked this question before, funnily enough, and I did think about it, and I'd say automation is generally using technology to perform a specific task using current technology, whereas a robot is a programmable machine where you can program it to design to replace tasks. So really automation is about optimizing your efficiencies and your processes, whereas robots are there to build a machine to perform more flexible tasks. But there are crossovers between the two of them, as I agree.
My answer was going to be that automation is the system, a robot is a tool, or as we've got the Euros on the moment, it's the difference between a team and a player. The robots are one of the players, because you have multiple robots to perform the task.
I can't add anything to this.
Well, I can actually add one other thing. Your system integrator is just as important as the machinery that you use. So if you think of everything, all of the equipment is part of a symphony or an orchestra. It's nothing without a good conductor. I mean, I could get up there and wave my arms around and people would think I was crazy. But you have a conductor who knows what they're doing. They can take simple, novice sort of musicians and get them to sound much better than someone who has no vague idea what they're doing.
And we are going to move on to the role of the system integrator.
Jumping ahead again.
To begin with, when we talk specifically about robotics, can you share kind of a really good example of where robots have really helped address these inefficiencies that we're talking about from a manufacturing perspective? And I know each of you have got a slightly different, probably kind of niche. So if you could kind of share something different. I think that would be great for the audience to understand.
Yeah, so I will jump into a sustainability case study. We've got a company in the UK called Recyclei, who 4.5 years ago started as a University of London project, and they're now at 50 people using robotics at the heart of their solution for sorting waste in a recycling stream. The inefficiency there is that the person's eyes and their motivation to pick waste from a waste stream does dwindle across the day, as you might imagine. You know, what they pick at the start of the day might be different to the end of the day, but with the right technology, the right AI-driven robot vision solution, it meets the demand across the whole day, yeah, and into the next shift and into the next shift. So with 50 pieces per minute picked, it's picking thousands and thousands of pieces of recyclable waste per day. That's a really good example of using automation and real high-tech technology in the vision system, which is AI guided, to actually manage the inefficiencies in that particular plant. It's not manufacturing, but it is vitally important for how we obviously go forward from a sustainability point of view.
And also reducing the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous in one hit.
We're working on safety standards in robots and safety standards in AGVs. I get asked a lot as soon as companies, startups and people wanting to integrate robots and these mobile vehicles, they always need help with safety, so I get involved in lots of many different interesting applications. And I go from people importing lathes to wanting to automate that into a manufacturing system, to people wanting to implement AGVs. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody implement safely or properly a robot and reduced inefficiencies. But I could name many, many examples, but we've only got 45 minutes.
I think you had me down for sort of talking about machine tending, so I was going to come on to one of what you said, what don't do. And so I think sometimes when you look at, say, machine tending application, so we look at the operator, he's loading a billet into a machine tool, shutting the door, pressing the cycle start button. And they say, oh, well, we could get a robot in to do that. But what the task is not what he's doing, because what he's doing is taking the component out, he's inspecting it, he's maybe part marking it, he's washing it, he's deburring it. There's so much more to what he's probably doing. And I think sometimes the management will look and see that his task is loading the machine, but he's doing a lot more to that. So you've got to, it's coming back to getting a clear view of what you want. You've got to look at what they're doing, and you've got to analyse the task, so that then when you bring your automation in, it does the same. So I think what I say don't do is think it's simpler than it is. You've got to look at the whole task and then analyse it and automate the whole line. Otherwise, all you'll do is have an operator standing waiting for the next. You'll replace an operator with a robot, but the operator's standing watching because he's got to wait for the product to come to him to do his next bit.
I'm going to backtrack on what I've just last said now, after you said that, because I have seen people buy a robot and reduce inefficiencies. And what it was a number of years ago, collaborative robots was the new sexy thing. And a lot of companies went out and just bought them, and they bought a collaborative robot, but not thinking about the task. And when they tried to implement that, they realised that actually this was more suitable for an industrial robot because they needed it to go faster, more accurate. So collaborative robots do have their place, and industrial robots also have their place, but there's kind of a bandwidth of fully collaborative all the way through to fully in a box. So I'd say what don't do is go out and buy your kit before you've had a good think about the task at hand, and write out a good safety concept and have a think about it before you implement that.
So that's a good time to do a pop quiz that wasn't planned, but all of the different types of robots in manufacturing, anybody want to share with the audience? Kind of. So we've said collaborative, industrial.
Well, it depends on what you mean by industrial.
I also want to say it's not a collaborative robot, it's a robot designed for collaborative robot applications.
Good point. Well, we have people called traditional robots, so 6-axis robots, but then you get SCARA robots, which are 4-axis. You get Cartesian systems. You get the collaborative robots, which could be 6-axis, it may not be. there's such a wide range. It's a bigger discussion, isn't it?
I think it's a really important discussion that we need to start having more of. So if you are thinking about robotics, don't just jump straight to one of the products, so maybe a headline cobot or an industrial robot. Take your time and work with the integrators and the manufacturers to understand the different types of robots and how they might solve your problem. So I suppose that probably moves us on to the role of the system integrator. And when we talk about kind of projects, and George, you kind of eloquently put it, you know, the conductor of the orchestra. How can system integrators help manufacturers kind of address these problems? And what role can system integrators and I suppose the BARA community play in helping manufacturing leaders build that business case for robotics and automation?
Okay, well, I think it's fairly safe to say that a system integrator can make or break the project, so it's important to do your homework and make sure you pick the right one. And I would say don't just assume that whoever you find on Google is the right one. Get several. Make sure they're not just in the same industry sector as well. Make sure that get advice from multiple industry sectors, because no one has all of the correct answers. In fact, there are no correct answers. Everyone will approach it slightly differently. So we sell linear robots, and I will approach the solution a little differently to how Ollie will with an articulated robot. But that's not to say that his solution is better or my solution is better. It's just a different approach.
So I would give you some advice in the way in which I believe a good integrator works with you as an end user to integrate robotics. So good integrators, I believe, when you have that first conversation at a trade show such as this, will help you define what needs to be automated in your facility. They'll come and offer their services to do a line walk with you, identify the low-hanging fruit or the systems that they believe can be automated. They'll lead you through specification design so that they know exactly what you need, making sure that the solution meets their business needs, your strategy as an end user. I think what happens then is they'll go away, they'll design concept, they'll pull together some ROM costing, some regional magnitude type costing. That will hopefully align with what the specification looks like. They'll then take that, build a full costing model. You may want to go to others and get that or give that specification to them also, so that you end up with 3 quotes, like most purchasing teams want globally now. You can then analyse and identify which of those partners you want to go forward with. And then once the order's placed, the real work starts for them, in that they can obviously go through the concept and the detailed design stages, the simulation, the design failure mode effect analysis, making sure that all the risk is covered off. And then when they start actually building, hopefully it's a fairly risk-free build. They get through to FAT, the acceptance testing, and you sign it off to say, yes, that meets my specification, which they helped develop in the first place. Once you get to that, it's installed, it's again site acceptance tested, it's then fully signed off, you've got your documentation pack, you're fully trained, and then for them, it doesn't stop. They've signed it off, they've delivered a fantastic automation solution. For them then, it's making sure that year on year, or whatever sort of frequency is needed, that they remain in contact and they still support that automation solution they've delivered, ensuring that you still get 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line what you actually signed up for initially. That's where I think the integrators really, really show their worth in having that long-term relationship with you as the end customer.
I think the sign of a good system integrator as well is they like to sing about what they're doing, because you often get case studies where they show where they worked in similar areas. But one thing about robotic applications as well is historically they came from what we call a Type C standard, because every robot cell looked the same. But actually every time you reprogram a robot or employ a robot, they're all completely different applications. So it's to ensure also that the systems integrator understands your business, and he'll have empathy with you, and he'll want to understand your processes and not just come in and try to flog his ways.
I think we all wish there was a standard solution for most applications. That would make our lives so much easier. Just going on from what Oliver was saying, when a system integrator is doing a factory walk, one thing that, because as end users, you're going to take them to what you think the problem is. And in a lot of cases, it's actually one process upstream or one process downstream. It's not necessarily where you think it is. That's just the bit that you see the problem. It could be that it's oversaturated, so it doesn't have anywhere to send the next product to, or it's being starved, so the process upstream is not providing enough product. And because we will come at it looking at with a fresh set of eyes, we don't have the same preconceptions that you do, so we're going to see something that you don't.
I was just going to add that sometimes when you're looking at specification of what you want to do, when you engage with your system integrator, listen to their experience and then be prepared to actually maybe compromise your requirements a bit, because they may advise you that it could be less expensive, more efficient if you engage with their advice. I've seen projects where it's been so defined and we've got to do it in 2 seconds, and we can't cope with 2.2 seconds. But the reality is that you get a better throughput solution, and that's just one example. It could be hundreds of things that sometimes people sort of bury themselves in and will not move to get a better solution which works for everybody.
Yeah, and I would also just add, don't be afraid to ask to see other sites. So system integrators have a bank of case studies, and when you're looking at building that kind of case for investment, get your senior team, your shop floor engineers to go and see, someone who has been on that automation journey, because I think that's really powerful and something that many system integrators are more than happy to kind of coordinate and organise to help as part of that step change of thinking.
If they can, if it's not protected under an NDA or something like that.
Yeah.
The other thing to add there is talk to the OEM robot manufacturers. So they will also have other integrators that you could talk to who may have niche applications, niche industries they work in, who again have got those reference sites that you can learn from. Whether it's the same application in the same industry or whether it's the same application in a different industry, there'll be people you can learn from by visiting those sites. So it's a really good point.
I think don't be afraid to ask about competence as well, because as integrators there are lots of things out there where you can show your competence, because we've gone from a time where an OEM would build a machine and then sign it off under the machinery directive, or the supplier of safe machinery directive now, and then the end user would take that machine and it would run in the corner on its own for the rest of its life. But now we have applications where they're semi-autonomous, so people are interacting with them, people are reprogramming robots, vehicles are wandering around factory floors, so there needs to be a kind of collaboration between the integrator, the OEM and the end user to ensure that this system is safe throughout its whole life cycle.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So final kind of question, so have a think about some of the questions that you want to ask our kind of panel. Is we touched on the start, kind of it's really important to have clear goals. So without clear goals and kind of performance metrics, is there a risk that people could over-automate, which actually could create inefficiencies? How do businesses kind of maintain that healthy balance between kind of current and future needs, and that balance between automation and kind of people and skills?
I'll start this one off. So the quick answer to that is yes, you can try to go too fast, too quick. I was in a previous job, I was called down to look at a glass manufacturing facility down in North London, and they said, we want to get rid of everybody, just automate everything, we want lights out. And we actually put a proposal together that would take them from 150 staff down to 4, and scared the living daylights out of them because they didn't think it was going to be possible. But not only did we show them how we could do it, but we also reduced it from 3 buildings to 2, just by simply relaying out the factory and making the process flow the way it should flow, instead of things being pulled here, there, and everywhere across the factory multiple times. But the fact that you presented them with a answer to the question and they weren't prepared for the answer, they didn't really think through all what they were asking us to do. And not only did we say, right, we can actually reduce all of these, the head count, but we can actually increase your throughput by 20% in the same breath. And it just scared them to death. And that's the thing that a lot of end customers don't appreciate is be careful what you ask for, because somebody may actually go, there's your solution. And so you do need to be prepared for somebody to come up and do that. But the quickest answer to the question is start small. Pick the one thing that's going to give you the biggest return on investment, not just in dollars and cents, but also in how your people work. Look for the 3Ds. Find the dull, the dirty, the dangerous. Do your manual handling risk assessments. And when you read the manual handling guidelines by the HSE, the first thing it says is, can you automate your process? And in most cases, there's probably a yes there.
I was just saying that simply get the robots or the automation to do the things that the automation and robots are good at, and then get the humans to do what they're good at and get the best efficiency. It's such an obvious thing to get the best out of your workers, and then it's a collaborative. You've got to get a buy-in from your workforce to adopt the automation to make it work. Humans can make automation fail, so you've got to get a good buy-in, get them doing what they're good at, and get the robots doing what they're better at.
One of the most the quote I always use is, risk reduction is a journey down a path of diminishing return. And that's safety, but actually automation is exactly the same. So there's an efficiency paradox where you'll reach a point where additional automation won't yield any additional gains. And actually there can be a worry that you're focusing too much on one part of the system, and downstream you're creating bottlenecks. So I think you have to think locally, but at the same time also consider the holistical impact of any automation that you apply.
I completely agree with that, Martin, in that I think most companies need to look at what the longer term strategy may be, and sort of to counter George's point there about making sure that the ROI fits, I would suggest potentially going down a different route there in terms of looking at total cost of ownership. So where most businesses look at, say, a sub 2 year payback in the UK, think longer term. That's what our European counterparts do, what our competition does globally. Sweden, I worked there for 5 years, look at between a 3 and 5 year total sort of payback period. But that leads itself to sort of more of a total cost of ownership model. Only 15 to 20% typically of an automation solution's cost comes in the actual original purchase price. The rest of it comes in what's paid for training, for support, for maintenance, for energy, for everything else that goes along with that automation solution in the longer term. So I would say to most companies, think about that longer term strategy, what that automation is there to actually achieve longer term for your business, because I think then it's easier for people to weigh up the real value when it comes to signing off that final the final check that needs to pay for it all.
Yeah, and checking the payback. I mean, people look at, this is what it's costing me to put an operator in there, and this is what I can do it for, so I look at my payback there. But it's all the other issues, recruitment, wastage, scrap. All these efficiency gains are there to be had. So you've got to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, I think outside of the money side of it as well, you're actually creating a better work environment for people, because what you're doing is you're replacing dangerous tasks with automation. You're releasing people to be more creative in other parts of the factory. And also, how cool is it to go home and tell your kids that you work with robots every day?
For the record, they get bored with it, just saying.
You need to try the drill trick.
So thank you very much, and I think it's key that, automation is a key enabler for the future, and, I'd just like to open the floor to questions. So if you've got a question, now is a really fantastic opportunity to ask our panel. So there you go. We've got a couple of roaming mics.
A quick one on, you talked about the dangers of, how to get buy-in. And people do get scared that it's just going to take jobs and they're going to be replaced. So how do you get that buy-in? Because obviously the message is, as you already explained, that it's about doing better things with your time than screwing a lid on a toothbrush or something. So how do you get buy-in?
I think the easiest way is to involve the operators. So make them aware that they're not being made redundant, they're being repurposed. So they're going to get a better job. It's going to be a more rewarding job. They're going to add more value to what products you're producing. There is no value that a human gets in packing a pack of biscuits into a box. There's no value that you're adding. All you're doing is putting biscuits in a box. We have the technology. But they will do things that's not necessarily in your standard operating procedure guidelines. So if it's a machine tending process, there may be a little something that they do when they're putting it in because it doesn't quite fit right as they're going in, so you have to approach it a certain way. That's the information. Those are the little tidbits of information that will make them feel wanted and needed and important, and they will then buy into the process. Say, okay, instead of running one machine, you're actually going to be responsible for 5 or 6 machines, but it's the automation around that machine. So use their experience, use their expertise around what you're doing. Get them part of the process.
I was just saying, in recent times, it's not about replacing people, it's about getting people that you can't recruit. Or not getting people you can't recruit, it's getting automation that you can't find people who will do, they're not available or they don't want to do it. And as George says about packing boxes onto pallets, how long do you want to do that for? Let's look at those tasks.
Yeah, and it goes back to the culture as well, getting the people involved at the business. And coming from sales and marketing in former roles, there's nothing worse than trying to go into a company and telling a production manager how to improve his processes when you don't know anything about them. And it can actually annoy them quite a lot. And it's a slow burner really, it takes time. So I think being customer centric and trying to understand their business and ask their questions and talk with the people and get them involved. And if you collaborate together, then you all come out with the better solution. And people are empowered then because they feel as though they've contributed to the automation.
The best projects I've seen is actually it's the operators who's been part of the project and they've actually led it, and then they get a sense of ownership and also get upskilled in the process. And I think there's lots of examples where people have made that positive step change.
Yeah, I've actually got an example of exactly that where I would put a robot in to do some machine tending, and we commissioned it and trained them how to use it and so on and so forth. And we went back 6 months later just to make sure everything was okay, and they're like, yeah, we've done a few modifications. We're thinking, we go out, and the operator had been fine-tuning the process, fine-tuning how the robot was working, and they'd cut half a second off the cycle time, and that you think, well, that's not a lot. Over a day or a week, that's a lot of time. That's a huge step, and it was because the operator understood how to load the part in on. And that's what we didn't know.
Just on your point about people having the fear of being replaced, I think that was your question. We've got one example where it was in a bakery. It's putting boxes. It's a palletising application, so end of line, conveyor, putting boxes onto a pallet. And so the installation went in, and the engineers on site actually after it'd been in a month or so, they actually wanted to move it to another line to test another line for potential of getting another one. And there was also almost a riot on the first line because they had to now carry on doing what they used to do before they bought the automation. So I think the workforce actually do buy into it pretty quickly, to be honest.
Have we, so just without putting over the conversation, have we got any more questions? Just because we're at 1:45 now, so we've probably got time for 1 or 2 more questions if there's any more questions.
Yeah, I've got a quick one. Do you guys have any sort of experience or previous support in sort of supporting very small volume manufacturing, very craft-like, hands-on manufacturing? Do you have any examples of how you've been able to implement any automation or robotics? From experience, we do a lot of craft, very manually made products in cable systems, and we're trying to look at how we can open the door to automation, and it's very difficult because of certain things that we have to do. So have you guys got any sort of experience or knowledge on how you've combated very manually driven manufacturing labour team? Yeah, so I think from my point of view, I've got one really good example, which is a process for sanding very, very high-end speaker systems, stuff you find in Mayfair in London. You know, what the company there looked for was the process that was the most labour-intensive. You know, what process was taking so much time that they wanted to employ more people doing it, but again, it's that dull job of sanding a high-end mahogany speaker. You know, so what could they do? So they approached us to look for solutions to actually sort of combat their need for more people with a robot solution, but using quite high-tech force sensing technology on the end of the robot arm to ensure that the process was the same every time. They could manufacture a speaker surround to X tolerance because it was worth that much money. How do you finish it with the sort of manual expertise of a manual sort of craft labour, if you like? But they use the high technology solution along with the robot to do so. So you talk about cable solutions, was it? It's sort of like cable looms, I guess, was it? Yeah, that's a nightmare. But yeah, there will be a solution there, absolutely right. So.
Yeah, I mean, in the 10 years I've been at SICK, I see everything from people wanting to automate woodwork machines, to automotive wanting to automatically check quality, to badge making machines automatically triggering presses. And this involves things like sensors for position, light curtains for automatic reset, collaborative robots for certain processes, industrial robots. So what I'd say is most suppliers have a wealth of case studies and experience, and if you invite them in, the good ones, then they can work with you and have a look at your processes. And I'd say just get as much information from as many people as possible, really.
Yeah.
On that cable loom application, the Catapult Centres, the NTC in Coventry, they are currently looking at low volume loom manufacturers, and it might be worth reaching out to them.
I think it's also important to look at how many times you produce that particular product. You may think it's only once in a blue moon, but when you do the evaluation, you'll find actually I'm making one of these every week or every month. In that case, yes, it is worthwhile going through and doing the programming of the application. So then all you do is say, because once you've got it programmed, then it doesn't go away. So you're just saying it's product 412 today instead of product 6.
Yeah, just touching on what Oliver said, I'm sure any one of us could kind of introduce you to a couple of people who potentially could kind of support even just outside of the industry that you're in, where robotics and automation has been used for that low volume kind of craft type setup. And I think most people are here at the show for the rest of the day, so more than happy to do that.
I'd also say that the BARA website's quite good as well. So if you go on there, there's lots of people that are members of the BARA Institute that you can go and have a look there too.
So unless there's any more questions, I think we're slightly over time. So I think everyone is here for the rest of the day, so please do catch up with any of us, and just like to say thank you to the panels for sharing kind of your perspective, and thank you all for listening, and have a lovely rest of day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.